Hello and welcome to Boardroom Brunch. I'm Sridharan, and with me today is a very special guest, Christopher Ripley, President and CEO of Sinclair. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Chris, we just wrapped up Thanksgiving and Christmas is around the corner. So what brings you to India?
Well, we're here testing and promoting a new wireless system called direct-to-mobile broadcast that we think is going to have a massive potential positive impact for the Indian consumer.
Okay. And this is going to break the distribution cord in some sense and take content directly to consumers. But there are going to be challenges because, as we know, in India there are only 750 million consumers who actually have access to internet. But the other side is there's a huge market, an equal number, who don't have access to internet. So what are the challenges that you think you're going to face as you try and roll out this technology to Indian consumers?
Well, unlike other markets that have legacy business models using up this spectrum, India has a free band of spectrum unused today and a huge opportunity in front of it to address the people who don't have access to high quality broadband internet. So this is aimed at the 300 plus million consumers who are still using feature phones, for instance, who can't afford a 4G plan, but still use their phone as their primary entertainment and information device. This is going to be a much more cost-effective and more robust way for them to get video and information to their device.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you is that these 300 million people don't need to use data on their phones. Instead, their video viewing will happen on the spectrum, which is the broadcast spectrum.
That's right? That is right. It will not. There will be no cost to the streaming over wireless networks, unlike how cellular data plans are used today.
And what about the experience, the quality? Will it be as good as, let's say, what you get on an IP, connection, internet connection, or would it actually be better than that?
Well, that's the interesting part. So not only is it lower cost, but it's a better product. We're talking higher resolutions, we're no buffering. So it doesn't matter how many people want to watch. So think about the big cricket match where you've got millions and millions of concurrent users. There will never be buffering. There'll never be a slowdown. There'll be very low latency to live, and the quality will be very high. So it's not only a better product, but it's also a lower cost product.
Mm-hmm. So, the media industry around the world has been going through a lot of disruptions. Newsrooms are shrinking, ad revenues are also under threat. This is yet another example of how technology is disrupting the marketplace as we know today. Given that you have a bird's eye view of what's happening around the world, especially US, which is the vanguard for media industry, what are the big challenges you would say that CEOs like you are grappling with today?
Well, it all comes down to user behavior, customer behavior. It's changing, and it's changing quickly. The younger generation does not act like the older generation. And that's why technologies like direct-to-mobile are so important, because we're meeting the consumer where they're at. It's the same in the US as it is in India. The consumer has moved to the mobile device, and we as media companies need to be there to meet them.
Right. So how about monetization then on, let's say, D2M? Who runs the ads and who decides how many people are watching? So you have some metric which the ad industry is going to need to look at whether the money is well spent.
You're absolutely right. And this is meant to be an enabling technology for other media companies to use to distribute their content to consumers. It will be digital, so you'll know exactly who's watching. You'll be able to send targeted ads. And to the extent you want to have paywalled content, you can also have that as well. So from a media company perspective, not only does it massively expand the available audience you can address through mobile phones and other devices, but it also gives you perfect measurement in terms of who's watching and the ability to target them with an ad.
Right. So a lot of the current viewing, especially of video, there's been explosion in video content. A lot of bandwidth is being used even by an average Indian consumer. So do you expect or anticipate any sort of resistance from mobile operators, because they'll be the ones who actually lose a chunk of the customers if they stop using data and they switch to, let's say, their broadband or the broadcast spectrum, which DTM is going to use?
So I think that's a little bit of a misconception because this does not replace a traditional unicast cellular network. It's a complement to. And we anticipate that people will have their unicast connection. Maybe it stays as a 2G, 3G until they can afford to upgrade, and that this will complement that. And so the wireless MNOs can use this to improve their quality of service, reduce their CapEx and their OpEx in terms of how dense their networks need to be in order to keep up with the demand, which quite frankly continues to outstrip the pace of supply.
Right. And how different would the handsets need to be from the current ones for someone to actually start using DTM? Do you need any sophisticated chips and antennas to receive these signals?
There is some new technology that has to make its way in, and I think a great example from the past is there once was a day when phones didn't have Wi-Fi in them. Right. Now it's unimaginable to think of a phone that doesn't have Wi-Fi in it. And it's not very expensive at scale to add this to the phone. And initially, we'll have to, as an industry, subsidize phones to get this included. But once there's a certain level of consumer adoption, this will be something that will be included in all phones.
Right. So, Chris, you run a very large media group in the U.S. You're one of the largest, one of the biggest, and you're no stranger to India either. So how do you look at the media landscape in India and the opportunity? Is there something that Sinclair would want to do apart from tapping the D2M opportunity? How do you read the media landscape in India?
Well, the media landscape is very exciting in India. We're always looking for opportunities to participate. In fact, we even have a tennis channel that operates here in India today, and we're looking to grow that. So. The media market, very exciting, and it's something that we're always looking to figure out how we can best participate.
So would that mean any kind of strategic partnerships? Because this economy is growing, and a lot of numbers and a lot of experts seem to suggest that we might be a 40 trillion economy by 2047. So that's a huge, stupendous growth. So I think it's in Sinclair's interest that you might want to participate in this phenomenal explosion that's going to happen.
Yeah, the rise of the Indian middle class is real, and it's going to be a huge driver for the global economy in the decades to come. And we would love to participate in that. I think most likely for a company like Sinclair, it'll be through partnerships.
Okay. Talking about media, it's absolutely been disrupted by social media in some sense because the big media owners were the publishers, the only publishers around. Then came, platforms like Twitter and made everyone into a micro publisher, right? So now getting thrown in this mix is this whole AI cocktail. So how do you think this is going to disrupt, one, creation of media content, and second, consumption, and therefore the challenges for news publishers and news owners?
Well, that's something we are literally grappling with right now. On the one hand, it's going to create just a huge volume of content and the inability for the consumer to understand what is real, what is trusted, what is not. That's on one side. On the other side, for companies like ourselves, it's going to enable us to produce better content from more platforms at a lower cost. So that's a good thing, but then you've got the bad on the other side. I actually think over time it will favor professionally produced, trusted sources. And those sources will use AI. We use AI to make content better and make it customized to the platform, but it will be to the detriment of the less trusted, less recognized outlets that can't be differentiated versus something that's been spoofed, for instance, by AI.
Right. So even as users of AI, I mean, newsrooms are eventually going to start using AI tools. Do you think there's a case for us to start using some guardrails to basically stop the AI system from hallucinating or creating fake content? Because we've seen that happen in newsrooms.
No, absolutely. All of the implementations of AI that we're looking at always have a human. So we may use AI to generate a headline. We may use it to actually write a story. And increasingly, we hope to use it to actually create video and customize various pieces for the platform that it's going to be on, for instance, like, say, Twitter or YouTube. But the last step is always a human. Make sure there's no hallucinations, as you mentioned. I think that's a big issue, and I don't see anytime soon, at least for us as a traditional media company, not having a human as that last quality check.
Right. So while we are talking of D2M in India, in the US we're talking of NextGen TV. So first, walk me through what has been the experience so far of broadcasters with NextGen TV. How receptive have consumers been? Are there any technological challenges in terms of hardware or even consumer behavior that you encountered?
So in the US, we've reached over 70% of the country in terms of conversion. There'll be over 10 million TV sets in the US that are NextGen activated. The market is developing as people buy new televisions. That's what's going on in the US. What we're talking about here in India is really quite different than what's happening in the US, because the US was a upgrade to an existing over-the-air terrestrial broadcast system for video on a wall that literally was stationary. It's not really being used for mobile, even though the standard can be mobily optimized. We are stuck with a legacy business model in the US essentially, and our content can't be sent mobily. We don't have the rights to do that. The spectrum we use has already been allocated and needs to support legacy business models. None of those issues exist in India. So what's so exciting about India is we have a blank sheet of paper. We have free spectrum to build what you should build in today's age, which is a mobile-first network. And that's what we're promoting here.
Right. But even in the US, apparently some television manufacturers, for example, LG, they're saying we're going to stop producing these NextGen TVs because there are some patent issues that they are not able to resolve. So is there a need for regulators to step in and make NextGen TV roll out as smooth as possible?
Well, that specific issue on LG, that is essentially a patent troll that went after LG. We think that will get resolved. I don't think you need regulators or governments to step in. It's unfortunate, but it is sort of a growing pain of a new technology and a new market. At least from a US perspective, where we do need the regulators is getting over that last hump. We're at 70+% of the country. We need to get to the 100%. And because no new spectrum has been allocated to American broadcasters, that last step is very difficult because we have to support our old standard and our new standard at the same time. And the FCC is looking at that. There is a Future of Television Committee that is doing the work right now so that we can complete the transition in the US.
Right. So in India, before you start rolling out D2M, are there any regulatory constraints or any changes that you require for it to become a reality?
The spectrum that we would need to use has already been allocated and provisioned to Prasar Bharati, your public broadcaster. And the intended uses are already within the scope of the existing regulatory framework. So we do need, of course, cooperation from MIB and Prasar Bharati, and but beyond that, we're not talking about really any changes to the regulatory framework.
Okay, so Chris, I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about what's exciting right now in the US news media, which is the ongoing elections. You have the presidential elections happening next year. And at the same time, we've seen in countries like Argentina, use of deep fakes. Is that becoming a big challenge for news publishers? Because if on social media, I'm going to be in my own echo chamber or a bubble, which is feeding me the same fake information, then how do legitimate publishers basically get even eyeballs to begin with and then get heard in this market?
No, it's a big challenge for sure. I am heartened that some of these social media platforms have been getting more sophisticated in shutting down automated sites or international players trying to influence people. But it's still getting increasingly hard for them to spot these things, and it's a big issue. And it's yet another reason why trusted sources, I think at the end of the day will win, but we're going through this period of time where everyone's still trying to figure it out.
Right. And the other challenge I think most newsrooms are dealing with is also this polarization of people in general. Right? People are now at the far ends of the spectrum. Right? I mean, even in the US, the country, I haven't seen the country more polarized than it is today. So for, let's say, a broadcaster like Sinclair, how do you address this challenge? Because if the market is getting fragmented and you have consumers who are choosing to live in their own smaller universes of reality, how do you as a broadcaster address this whole, it's a massive issue.
It is a massive issue, and there's a couple things I'll say about it. One is social media exasperates it, and it makes it seem more polarized than it actually is. When you actually go into the population, there's less polarization than would be implied by social media. Now, that being said, if you are a commercial media business like we are, and like some big national players who do CNN or Fox News, you're not necessarily economically incented to help the situation. Certainly, that's true when you look at the U.S. national news players. They feed polarization because it gives them ratings, and that's how they get paid. Our business, which is predominantly local news, is very focused on down the middle of the fairway, unbiased, what's going on in your local community. And it is still today in the U.S., despite everything going on, one of the most popular sources of news in the country, because I think people realize, people are looking for that unbiased, for that just hard news outlet. Local news is really the last bastion of that, and that is really the core of what we do at Sinclair. And we work very, very hard to make sure that that bias is controlled, and that we are not sensationalizing, that we're not polarizing. But at the end of the day, it's a free marketplace. The consumer needs to choose.
Right.
Thankfully, they've continued to choose our outlets on a consistent basis.
Right. So who do we see occupying the White House next year? Or maybe January 2026?
Well, it's almost a year away, or a little less than a year away. So just about anything I say right now is going to be wrong.
But take a guess.
But certainly, look, if you look at the numbers right now, Trump is looking very strong.
True.
And Biden is, he needs to really come up with some wins here. And really, I think he has more of a perception problem than a reality problem in many ways. And the population thinks that he's too old. And that's been really hard to fix. When you look at it, Trump's actually not that much younger. So, but he has escaped that problem so far. So by the numbers, it looks like Trump, but a lot can happen in a year.
Absolutely. So finally, Chris, if you were to list 4 or 5 things that keep you up at night as the CEO of a large news organization, what would those 3 or 4 things be?
Well, I think you covered a lot of them in this interview. Changing consumer behavior. That's the number one problem, keeping ahead of that. I mean, we saw what happened to the newspaper industry when they didn't keep up with changing consumer behavior. Just, all of a sudden, many newspapers are basically irrelevant in the U.S. Only the biggest, best brands that have made the transition to digital. This polarization issue is a huge issue because it goes against many of the commercial incentives that exist in the marketplace. So how do you both do what you're supposed to do as a business, which is maximize profit, but then also do what's best for society? That's a tough balancing act. Labor issues are another big issue in the U.S., as I'm sure it is here in India. Unemployment's at an all-time low. Disruption in people's jobs is at an all-time high. We've got to incorporate AI in order to stay competitive, but yet still be able to employ enough people and make our jobs attractive to a higher quality of person who can use that AI effectively. So those are just some of the things that keep me up at night. But as I said, you did a great job of basically covering them already.
Right. So thank you very much, Chris, for joining us on Boardroom Brunch, and all the best with your D2M initiatives in India.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all on Boardroom Brunch. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you for joining us.